The breaker tripped at 9:18 on a Friday night. Daniel Hayes climbed to the 38th floor of Whitmore Tower, seated the switch in under 4 minutes, and stepped onto the balcony to coil his cable. He did not see her at first. Claire Whitmore stood at the rail. A single cigarette burned to her fingers. Daniel turned. "Ma'am, I'll come back." "Stay." He glanced at the dress, the empty skyline, the way she held herself. Beautiful night for a woman who looks married to her company. She did not turn. "I'd trade it for you." She crushed the cigarette and walked inside before he could see her face. Saturday and Sunday passed without him telling anyone. Daniel poured cereal for Lily, drove her to her grandmother's house in Plaza Midwood, and spent the afternoon repairing a porch rail he had been meaning to fix since June. He thought about quitting before things got complicated. He decided to wait the week. Claire spent Saturday at her townhouse in Myers Park, rereading a deposition that did not need rereading. She thought about him in increments. What he had sounded like, what he had been doing on the 38th floor at 9 on a Friday night, why she had said what she said. Monday morning at 6:12 she walked into her office. Eleanor Reyes set a black coffee on the desk without a word. Nora had brought her coffee every working morning for 14 years. She noticed the change in her boss before her boss did. The way Claire's eyes had stopped being tired and started being awake. Nora did not ask. She closed the door behind her. At 8:15 Daniel stood in the lobby elevator. The doors began to close. A heel caught the edge. He pressed the hold button without looking. Claire stepped in. 8 floors of silence. 2 strangers who had stood on the same balcony. When the doors opened on 38, she said, "Thank you." It was the first word she had ever said to him in 2 years and 7 months of working in the same building. He nodded at the wall and did not turn. Marcus Vance pushed open her office door at 9:30 without knocking. He set the Brennan Capital prospectus on her desk. 240 pages, dark blue binding, embossed. "They want a letter of intent by year end," he said. 12 weeks. "I've reviewed the structure. It's clean." Claire did not open the prospectus. "I'd like to review it myself, Marcus." "Of course." He smiled the way he had smiled at her since she was 28. "But the train is moving. Wade Brennan is a serious man. He does not wait. Then he can learn." Marcus did not stop smiling. He left. Claire opened the prospectus to page 1 and read for 40 minutes. She understood about a third of it. She closed it, walked to her window, and looked down at the line of Whitmore trucks idling at the loading dock 6 floors below. 2,300 employees. 2,300 families. Her father's company. Her father's promise. At 11 that night, she sat in her home office with a single lamp on. She opened the Human Resources portal and typed a name she should not have known. Daniel Hayes. Maintenance supervisor. Hired 2.5 years ago. Marine Corps, 2004 through 2010. 2 tours, Anbar Province. Wife, Sarah Hayes. Deceased March 2022. 1 dependent, age 8. No social presence. Perfect attendance. She read the file twice. She did not save it. She closed the laptop, walked to her bedroom, and lay down without undressing. Across town in the bungalow on Davidson Street, Daniel sat on his back porch with the kitchen light off behind him. He could hear Lily breathing through the cracked window of her bedroom. He thought of a woman whose face he had not seen, and he understood for the first time in 4 years that the rule he had made for himself, no one knew, had been a rule built for a man he no longer was. He went inside. He did not sleep. Wednesday morning, 7:05. Claire told Nora she was going down to check facilities. Nora did not ask which facilities. Claire took the service elevator she had ridden twice in 7 years and pressed B2. Daniel was alone in the maintenance break room, drinking coffee from a paper cup. He looked up. She stepped inside and closed the door behind her. "I looked you up," she said. "Most of what's online is wrong. Tell me what's right." He set the cup down. He had known since Saturday that this conversation would come. He had not known he would be ready. Marine Corps, logistics officer. 2 tours, out in 2010. I started a company with a man I'd served with, Meridian Freight, Boston, trucking and warehousing. We built it to $400 million in annual revenue over 9 years. My wife was diagnosed in November 2021. She lived 4 months. I sold my half in June after she died. Took 40 million after taxes, put it in a trust for my daughter, and a small annuity for myself. I moved to Charlotte to be near my mother-in-law. I needed a job with predictable hours so I could pick up Lily at 3. That is what is right. Claire did not move. Why this building? The pay was fair. The benefits covered my daughter, and the woman who runs it had never looked at me, so I never had to explain who I'd been. A long beat, the hum of the freezer in the corner, the distant chunk of a fleet truck shifting gear in the loading dock above them. I'm looking at you now, Mr. Hayes. I noticed, ma'am. Don't call me ma'am down here. Then what? Claire. She walked to the door. Her hand was on the handle. She stopped. Friday on the balcony. I had never said that out loud. Not to anyone. I want you to know that. She left before he could answer. She rode the service elevator back up alone, watching the floor numbers climb. At her office, she opened the Brennan prospectus for the second time. She made notes in the margin. By 11, she had filled 4 pages with questions she did not know how to ask. She buzzed Nora. Sit down. Nora sat. I am going to ask you something I should have asked you 6 years ago. Tell me what you have been afraid to tell me. Nora's hand closed around her own keycard. Not here, Claire. Not in this office. My house. Tonight. Nora nodded once and left. In the basement, Daniel washed his coffee cup at the small sink, set it on the rack to dry, and stood with his palm pressed against the wall above the rack for longer than he meant. He took his phone from his back pocket. He opened his contacts and scrolled to a name he had not called in 4 years. Marcus Donovan, his Meridian co-founder, now running a logistics consultancy in Cambridge. He did not press call. He stared at the name for a full minute, then he put the phone away. He did not yet know what he would need, but he had begun to know that he might need it. That afternoon in the break room, he taped a small photograph back inside the front cover of his work notebook. Sarah and Lily at a beach in Maine, Lily 4 years old, both squinting at the sun. He had taken the photograph down the morning he started at Whitmore. He put it back. Saturday morning was cold. Daniel was called in to inspect the fire sensor array on B2. Lily came with him in the passenger seat of his pickup, a chapter book about whales on her lap, and a peanut butter sandwich in a paper towel on the dash. He left her in the lobby with the doorman, a retired Marine named Reuben, who had known Daniel since the day Daniel was hired, and had never asked a single question. Lily took the leather couch nearest the elevator bank and opened the book to a page about orcas. Claire entered the lobby at 9:40 in a gray sweater and jeans, holding a takeaway cup from the Lupi's Cafe across the street. She saw the child before she saw the doorman. She sat down on the couch 1 seat over. What are you reading? Lily looked up. Orcas. Did you know they have grandmothers? I didn't. The grandmothers help raise the babies. My grandma helps raise me because my mom went to heaven. Claire took a moment. Your grandma must be a good one. She is, but she snores. Claire laughed. It was the first sound of its kind she had made in the lobby of her own building in 12 years. Reuben at the desk looked up, blinked, and pretended he had not. The service elevator opened. Daniel stepped out and saw the two of them on the couch. He stopped for half a breath. Then he crossed the marble floor. Lily, this is Miss Claire. Miss Claire, this is my daughter. We met, Lily said. She doesn't know about orca grandmothers. I'm sure Miss Claire is a busy woman. I'm not, actually, Claire said. Not until 11. Can I buy you both breakfast across the street? Daniel hesitated for 1 full second. Lily had already stood up. They walked to Lupi's Cafe 3 abreast on Tryon Street, Lily between them. The diner was warm and smelled of bacon and burnt coffee. They took a booth by the window. Lily ordered pancakes shaped like a face. Daniel ordered eggs. Claire ordered the same as Daniel without thinking. While Lily described her school project, a family tree of whales with photographs taped to construction paper, Claire watched the way Daniel cut his daughter's pancakes without being asked. She watched the way he sipped his coffee with the cup at 3/4 height. The way a man drinks who has learned to drink fast in a uniform. She watched the way Lily corrected him about the spelling of beluga, and he accepted the correction without irony. When Lily slid out of the booth to wash her hands at the back of the diner, Daniel watching from the booth, Claire spoke quietly. I haven't had breakfast with a child since I was 1. She likes you. I don't know how to be liked by a child. You just were. That's how it works. She looked at him. You're not what I thought you were. I'm not what I thought I was either. Lily came back. They paid the check. Claire reached. Daniel shook his head. Daniel paid. On the walk back to the building, they passed the Halloween supply store on the corner of 6th and Tryon. Lily stopped at the window. "Daddy, I want to be a velociraptor this year." "Done, baby," Claire said, before she had decided to say it. "What night is trick-or-treating?" Daniel did not turn his head. Saturday. She did not promise. She did not ask. But he saw her file it. Across the city at the Quail Hollow Club, Marcus Vance was finishing 18 holes with 2 members of the Whitmore board. He had reviewed Wednesday's lobby footage. He had not yet seen what he would see by Sunday, but he was learning to look. Saturday, October 31st. The temperature dropped to 46 degrees by sundown. Daniel zipped the back of Lily's velociraptor costume in the kitchen of the bungalow on Davidson Street while she held perfectly still and breathed through her mouth like a small dragon. Tail straight, tail straight. They began the route at 6 o'clock on the corner of Davidson and 16th. Lily ran ahead to the first porch with a plastic pumpkin under her arm. Claire arrived at 6:12. She had parked 3 blocks away. She walked up in jeans and a cream sweater she had bought the previous weekend at a thrift store on Central Avenue. The first thrift store purchase of her adult life. She had not called. She had not asked. She had remembered an address Lily had recited at the diner 6 days earlier. Lily saw her first. "Truck lady, you came." She ran across the sidewalk and hugged Claire's leg through the velociraptor costume. Claire looked at Daniel over the child's head. Daniel only nodded. They walked the route 3 abreast. On the dark stretches between streetlights, Lily lifted both hands, one to her father, one to Claire. Claire did not pull her hand away. The velociraptor tail dragged behind them on the sidewalk like the wake of a small ship. At a house on 18th Street, a gray-haired woman opened the door, took one look at the 3 of them, and said, "What a beautiful family." Daniel opened his mouth. Claire said before he could speak, "Thank you, ma'am." Daniel looked at her. She looked at Lily. They came back to the bungalow at 8:30. Lily was asleep on the couch by 8:45 with the velociraptor tail still strapped to her waist and chocolate at the corner of her mouth. Daniel carried her to her bedroom, untied the tail, pulled the blanket to her shoulder, and stood for a moment in the doorway. When he came back to the kitchen, Claire was at the counter dividing the candy into 2 bowls. "These for tomorrow. These for emergencies," she said, as if she had done it every year of her life. He came to the other side of the counter. They stood, the bowl of mini Snickers between them. He reached for one. She reached for the same one. Their hands touched at the wrist. Neither moved. "Claire, I know. You should go before I ask you not to. I know." She drove home to Myers Park slowly, taking Independence Boulevard the long way. In her own driveway, she sat with the engine off for 10 minutes. She did not cry. She did not smile. She sat. In Lily's bedroom, Daniel sat on the edge of his daughter's bed in the dark and listened to her breathing. Lily turned her head against the pillow without waking. "Daddy?" "Yeah, baby. Is Miss Claire allowed to come back?" "If she wants to, baby. If she wants to." "She wants to." Lily was asleep again before the sentence finished. Daniel sat in the dark on the edge of his daughter's bed for a long time, and somewhere on the other side of Charlotte, a woman who had not exhaled in years was beginning to learn how. Monday morning, November 2nd. Marcus Vance reviewed 48 hours of lobby security footage at his desk before 9 o'clock. He saw what he was looking for. He did not need much. At 10, he met 3 board members for coffee at the Capitol Grill on Tryon: Howard Pace, Edward Lynn, and Patrick Donnelly. He laid out the framework over scones and black coffee. "Gentlemen, our chief executive officer is personally entangled with a maintenance employee. There is photographic evidence. Brennan Capital is watching. We close the merger by year-end or we lose it. I am proposing a vote of confidence at the November 25th board meeting. Public. On record. If she has nothing to hide, she has nothing to fear." Howard Pace, 71, drank his coffee. "Marcus, what exactly are you proposing she be confidence voted on?" "On her continued fitness to lead a publicly capitalized $2 billion enterprise." Pace looked at the table. He did not answer. That afternoon, Claire received a formal letter from the board chair. Personal Conduct Review. November 25th. The morning before Thanksgiving. She read it twice. She did not call her lawyer. She buzzed Nora. "Tonight, my house. Bring whatever you have been keeping." Nora arrived at 9:15 with a leather portfolio and a USB drive. They sat at Claire's kitchen island under a single pendant light. Nora did not take off her coat. "Claire, I have had these for 6 months. I was afraid because of Howard's dialysis. I am still afraid, but I am here." She slid the portfolio across the granite. "There are 89 emails between Marcus and Wade Brennan, the principal of Brennan Capital. The first is dated August 14th of last year. The most recent is from Friday." Claire opened the portfolio. She read the first email. She read the 5th. At the 12th, she set the page down, stood up and walked to the kitchen window. Below her, the lights of Myers Park stretched toward Eastover. "He has promised them I will be gone by Q4. Yes. He is receiving $4 million in signing bonus and the chief executive seat at the merged entity. Yes. And he has been making these calls from my father's office, from your father's desk. The desk you locked the week after the funeral. He picked the lock 7 days later." Claire stood at the window for a long minute. Then she turned. "Nora, tomorrow morning at 7 I need David Kerrigan in my office. And I need you to tell me everything you know about a man named Daniel Hayes." Nora did not blink. "I already know, Claire. I have known for 6 months. Since the day after he held the elevator for you for the first time, and you forgot to look at him." Claire sat down on the kitchen stool. "You knew. I have known you since you were 22. I always knew." Claire reached across the granite and put her hand on Nora's. Nora's hand was shaking. Claire's was steady for the first time in 7 years. In a small bungalow on Davidson Street, Daniel was reading a chapter book to his daughter about a girl who lived on a farm with a pig. He was reading in a voice that was not the voice of a maintenance supervisor. It was the voice of a man who had once read prospectuses for a living and who had begun, finally, to remember which voice was the costume. Tuesday morning, 7 o'clock. David Kerrigan sat in Claire's office in a navy suit older than his oldest grandchild. She slid the portfolio across the desk. He read for 32 minutes without speaking. When he finished, he placed the portfolio on the corner of the desk and folded his hands on top of it. "This is wire fraud, breach of fiduciary duty, and commercial bribery. Federal. I will draft the internal complaint by noon and the Securities and Exchange Commission filing by end of day. But none of that wins a board vote. To win the room on November 25th, we need a second weapon." "What weapon?" "An analysis of what Brennan actually intends to do with this company. The emails show motive. The room needs to see consequence. Specifically, to the workers. Howard Pace was a Teamster's son. Robert Mears drove a route truck out of the Greensboro hub for 11 years before he wore a suit. They will turn on Marcus if they understand the math of 2,300 jobs. But I am a lawyer. I can read contracts. I cannot read trucks." Claire looked at her hands. "I do not have an operator I can trust inside this company." Kerrigan waited until she lifted her eyes. "You have one in the basement, Claire." She did not understand. "Daniel Hayes. He works on our HVAC system. He built Meridian Freight. You know this. You read his file." "I read the file 2 weeks ago. I never asked who hired him." "Your father did." She did not speak. "Your father met him 8 years ago at a logistics conference in Atlanta. Meridian had been profiled in the Wall Street Journal that month. Your father read the piece on the plane. He sat next to Daniel at dinner the second night. He came home and told me, for once, an operator worth watching. He died 9 months later. And Daniel, 2.5 years ago, a hiring memo for a maintenance position crossed my desk on routine review. The name was Daniel Hayes. The Marine Corps record matched. I made the calls myself. By the time he sat in my office, he had sold his half of Meridian, buried his wife, and moved to Charlotte to be near his mother-in-law. He did not tell me most of that. I did not need him to. I hired him in your father's spirit. I should have told you. I am telling you now." Claire put both hands flat on the desk and breathed once. The pen on her blotter rolled half an inch and stopped. That night at 10, David Kerrigan called Daniel from the kitchen of his ranch house in Eastover. "Daniel, the Optimist Hall bar on North Davidson. Tonight at 10:30. Bring a pen." They sat in the back booth. Kerrigan slid the Brennan term sheet across the table. 56 pages, soft-bound, half-margined notes in pencil. "Claire did not ask me to come to you. I came because I made a promise to her father 19 years ago that if this company was ever in danger, I would find the right people. Read this. Tell me what it is." Daniel read for 3 hours. He drank 1 beer in the 3rd hour. By 1 in the morning he had filled 6 pages of yellow legal pad in handwriting that had not changed since 2013. He turned the pad and slid it back across the table. It is not an acquisition. It is a wind-down structured as an acquisition. They will lay off the entire long-haul division within 10 months. They will sell the fleet to Schneider National within 14. They will monetize the customer book and dissolve the brand inside 2 years. 2,300 jobs gone. The Charlotte hub closes by next summer. Kerrigan looked at the legal pad. She needs to see this. Yes, she needs to see you give it to her, son. Daniel sat with his palms flat on the booth table. 4 years he had promised himself. No more boardrooms. He thought of the bowl of Snickers and the way her wrist had touched his and not pulled away. He nodded once. Set the meeting. Wednesday morning, November 25th, 9 o'clock. The board met on the 40th floor in the room where Arthur Whitmore had once shouted at a man for selling diesel above contracted spot rate. The mahogany table was still the table he had bought in 1991. 7 members. Marcus Vance at his usual seat near Howard Pace. David Kerrigan at Claire's right, which was not his usual seat. Marcus noted it. Marcus opened. Today we vote on a motion of confidence in our Chief Executive Officer. The grounds are matters of personal conduct that have come to the attention of 3 members of this board and that present material risk to the Brennan transaction. I would like to enter the photographic evidence into the record, Claire said. Howard, may I propose an amendment to the agenda before we proceed? Howard Pace looked at Marcus. Go ahead, Claire. Kerrigan stood. I move that this board, before voting on any matter today, review all communications between board members and Brennan Capital Partners from August 14th of last year through this morning. Marcus's face did not change. His hand did. The pen between his fingers stopped moving. That is outside the scope of today's agenda, Howard Pace said. It is within my discretion as chair. Continue, David. Kerrigan read 3 excerpts aloud. The third was a single sentence. She will be gone before signing. I have prepared the ground. The $4 million we discussed will be processed through the consulting subsidiary. The room did not move. The clock on the wall struck 9:15. Kerrigan did not sit. There is a second document for the record. A 56-page operational analysis of the Brennan term sheet, prepared by an independent logistics operator at this board's request. I will summarize. Under the proposed structure, 2,300 employees will be terminated within 18 months. The long-haul division will be dissolved by August. The fleet will be sold to Schneider National. The Whitmore brand will cease to exist by the second quarter of next year. Robert Mears, 65 years old, who had driven a Whitmore tractor between Greensboro and Knoxville for 11 years before he wore a suit, set down his coffee. 2,300 drivers and dispatchers, mechanics, dock workers, 312 in the Charlotte hub alone. Howard Pace looked at Claire. Who is the analyst? Claire said. His name is on the document. Daniel Hayes. He is also currently a maintenance supervisor in this building. My father met him 8 years ago at a logistics conference and told David Kerrigan to keep an eye on him. David hired him 2.5 years ago when his name crossed our desk. I did not know any of that until yesterday morning. Marcus stood. This is theater. Howard Pace did not raise his voice. Sit down, Marcus. The vote was called. Not on Claire. On Marcus. Removal for breach of fiduciary duty. Howard Pace. Aye. Robert Mears. Aye. Edward Lynn. Aye. Patrick Donnelly. Aye. Margaret Voss. Aye. 2 abstentions. 5-2. Marcus stood, gathered his coat from the back of his chair, and walked out without speaking. Kerrigan had filed the Securities and Exchange Commission complaint at 6:50 that morning. The room emptied slowly. Claire did not take the executive elevator. She walked the 8 flights down to B2 in heels on concrete. Daniel was in the maintenance break room with 2 cups of coffee on the metal table. He had poured the second cup 20 minutes earlier, when Kerrigan had texted him a single word. Done. She sat down across from him. He pushed the second cup toward her. She took it in both hands. You wrote me 6 pages. I wrote the chief executive 6 pages. I would write you anything. My father saw you. Yes. How many times have I passed you in the elevator? 328. She looked up. You counted? Every time. Neither reached for the other. But for the first time in 7 years, Claire Whitmore sat down at a table and felt herself on the same side of it as another human being. 3 weeks after Thanksgiving, the United States Attorney for the Western District of North Carolina announced the indictment of Marcus Vance on counts of wire fraud and commercial bribery. Wade Brennan was subpoenaed within 48 hours. The Brennan transaction was dead by December 18th. Whitmore stock rose 8% in 5 trading days. Claire announced a restructuring 2 days before Christmas. Robert Mears was named president for daily operations. Nora Reyes was promoted to chief of staff at a salary that paid Howard's medical bills for the next decade without touching his retirement. Claire capped her own work week at 50 hours. She set a morning alarm for the first time in 7 years. She offered Daniel a senior strategic advisor role. Full salary. Equity. The corner office on 36. He took her hand on her kitchen island and said, "Claire, I am not going back to a tower. I will think with you any night you need me. I will read anything you put in front of me, but I am keeping the maintenance job. I am keeping Lily's 3 o'clock pickup. That is the deal." She did not argue. She respected the answer more than any answer he could have given. A rhythm built. Tuesday and Thursday evenings, she came to the bungalow on Davidson Street. Sunday afternoons, she came for lunch. Lily decided on her own that Claire was allowed to read the bedtime story on Tuesdays, because Tuesdays were quieter days. Claire bought the next book in the chapter series at a bookstore on her way out of the office, and did not tell Daniel until she was already pulling into his driveway. The first Sunday of February, Claire brought a grocery bag and a recipe card written in her own handwriting. The card said, in pencil, "Lasagna, Mom's." She had not made the recipe in 20 years. She had not had her mother in 20 years. The lasagna burned at the edges. The cheese was rubbery in the middle. The sauce was too sweet. 13. Lily ate it without leaving a single piece on her plate, chewing slowly with the seriousness of a small judge. "It's very brave lasagna, Miss Claire." Daniel began to laugh, and did not stop. Claire laughed until she could not breathe. Lily, not understanding the joke, laughed because they were laughing. The kitchen smelled of garlic and forgiveness. Later, after Lily was asleep, Daniel walked Claire to the door. He stopped in the hallway outside Lily's bedroom. The dinosaur lamp glowed green through the doorway. "Sarah wrote me a letter before she died. I did not open it for 3 years. I opened it last week. Do you know what she wrote?" Claire shook her head. She wrote, "Don't be alone too long, Dan. Lily will need a woman who knows what real means." Claire stood very still. What does real mean? Showing up in a thrift store sweater on Halloween, burning lasagna for an 8-year-old, sitting on the same side of the table after 12 years of sitting alone. He reached out in the dark hallway. She put her hand in his. He did not pull her toward him. He only held. 30 seconds. When she took her hand back to put on her coat, his palm was still warm. She drove home through the cold streets of Myers Park, and for the first time since her father died, the house she lived in felt small. Early February brought the first real snow in Charlotte in 4 years. 6 inches by midnight. Half of Mecklenburg County lost power by morning. Lily was at a sleepover on Park Road that had been extended for 2 nights by the storm. Claire's BMW would not start in her driveway. She called the only person she called anymore. Daniel arrived in his pickup with chains on the tires 40 minutes later. The truck had heated seats. He drove her back to the bungalow on Davidson Street, which had not lost power because he had rewired the house's electrical panel himself the previous fall. The kitchen was warm. He put a pot of chicken stock on the stove. She stood at the window over the sink and watched snow fall on the empty street. "I haven't been somewhere this quiet in my adult life." "I haven't either. Until I moved here." He put a record on. The turntable was older than Lily. Patsy Cline began to sing about being crazy for loving someone. He did not ask her to dance. She did not ask him. She came around the kitchen island and put her arms around his waist and rested her forehead against the place between his collarbones. His hands came up to the small of her back. They moved slowly in the kitchen. A log split in the living room fireplace. "Daniel." "Yeah. I don't know how to be loved by someone who isn't waiting for me to fail. You don't have to know yet. You just have to let me try." He kissed her. The first time. Slow. Both his hands came up to her face and held it the way a man holds a thing he has waited 4 years for and is afraid of breaking. She stayed the night. They slept, actually slept, hands touching above the blanket, and Claire Whitmore slept 8 uninterrupted hours for the first time in 12 years. In the morning she came down to the kitchen in his gray sweater, which fit her badly and beautifully. He was pouring coffee. He turned and looked at her standing in the doorway with her hair still tangled from sleep, and the floor of the bungalow seemed to pause for a second under his feet. He drove her home through salted streets. He drove slowly. He kept one hand on the gear shift and the other on her knee. They did not speak for the first 10 minutes. At her driveway, he stopped the truck. "Claire." "Yeah." "I don't want to do this halfway." "I don't either. Move slowly with me." "Lily, she needs to know you are staying before she lets herself love you. Then she'll know. I'll tell her. Or you will, either way." He did not kiss her goodbye. He only touched the side of her face once with his thumb. Thursday. "Lily is presenting her whale family tree to the class. She wants you in the second row." She nodded. She watched his pickup pull away through the salted snow until it turned at the corner of Providence Road. She stood in her own driveway in his gray sweater and a borrowed coat for a long time. Inside her townhouse, which she had owned for 7 years and had never finished decorating, the rooms felt the way rooms feel when they are no longer the only place a person sleeps. October. The 46th anniversary of Whitmore Logistics. Claire moved the event from the 38th floor to the lobby. She invited the drivers. She invited the mechanics. She invited the dock workers from the Charlotte hub and asked them to bring their wives, their husbands, their children. The fleet was parked along Tryon Street in 2 staggered rows, headlights on. In honor of the company they had carried for 46 years, Daniel wore a charcoal suit Claire had picked out for him at a small tailor in Dilworth. Lily was 9 years and 7 months old. In a navy dress, hair in a French braid Claire had finally learned to do without it slipping. Lily had insisted on the braid that morning, sitting on the kitchen stool while Claire stood behind her with 3 sections of hair and a YouTube tutorial paused on her phone. Claire spoke from a low platform without a microphone. She did not read from a paper. "My father built this company to move things from one place to another. I spent 15 years thinking that meant trucks. It took me another year to learn it also meant people. Including me, including the 2,300 people in this lobby tonight. We will still be here next year. I promise that to all of you." The applause that came back to her was not the applause of a board. It was the applause of people whose jobs were still their jobs. Afterward, she and Daniel walked up the service stairs to the 38th floor. The same balcony, the same view of Tryon Street, the same wedge of skyline. "Same view," he said. "Different woman." He reached inside his coat and took out a small key on a keychain. The keychain was a tiny green plastic Tyrannosaurus Rex, slightly chewed in one corner. "Lily and I made this last week. This is the key to the house. Any night you want. No schedule, no conditions." Claire took the key. She did not cry. She closed her hand around it as if it weighed more than it did. "I don't have anything to give you back, Daniel. I don't know how to give like this. Claire, you gave me back the man I had forgotten how to be. That is everything I wanted." She kissed him on the balcony. Slow, without an audience, without a witness, without a city watching. When they came back inside, Lily was waiting at the elevator door with a paper plate of cake. She took Claire's hand without speaking and led her across the lobby. Daniel followed 2 steps back, watching the woman he had once spoken to in jest and the daughter he had once raised alone walk together through a room full of people who had all kept their jobs. A Whitmore tractor passed slowly on Tryon Street below the window. A small child in the cab waved at his mother through the lobby glass. She waved back. The light in the lobby was yellow and the cold outside was real. He had spoken in jest. She had answered before she knew it was a vow. And in the year that came after, neither of them ever called what they had built a deal, because deals had terms, and they had only ever had one promise between them: to stay.